Good morning. I apologize about the little mistakes in the schedule. I just really appreciate your flexibility. You would think, a step-by-step process was simple and easy to get through, but somehow those steps just leap in front of each other and get mixed up. But here we are. Good morning, I'm Rachel Tarpey. A lot of you know me and I know you, but I'm a local mom and I'm a membership of this Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I live here in Houghton. So I think I was asked to talk with you today and occasionally throughout the year because I hear and listen to stories. And I also have unique exposure and time around different communities, both human and non-human communities. First, I work for Keweenaw Indian community, the tribe down in Baraga, as their tribal forester. So I get the honor of working and serving this distinct group of people. Secondly, as a forester, I spend a lot of time in the woods, around trees, and plants and water and animals. So when I hear stories, they get to sink in for a little while. I get to think about them, and then I get to share these thoughts with you. So I'm happy to be here with you today. Today, I'd like to share a story of belonging with you. And it's actually Ricky's story, so I'm happy to tell you about him too. First of all, I often tell a glimpse of this story, maybe a shadow of it. Part of my job in the field of conservation and tribal forest ecology and management is education and outreach. I present to external groups and organizations, like I just gave a presentation to a forestry class over at Tech in Houghton. So I tell them a glimpse of this story when I'm describing the L'Anse Reservation, where I work. I state that it's the oldest and the largest reservation in Michigan, being founded by the treaties of 1842 and 1854, and encompassing approximately 66,000 acres. But the neat part that I like to highlight is the fact that the L'Anse Reservation was established in place around a distinct group of people. So these Ojibwe people have been living in and using the rich and diverse woods of the Western UP and fishing in the fertile Keweenaw Bay for generations and generations. And this is relatively unique for a reservation in our country. As many of us know, so many reservations were established in unused wastelands in Wyoming, Oklahoma, and Montana in the early history of our country. And so many Indigenous people were forcibly moved to these large Western reservations, just like the Trail of Tears. So that's usually where I end this topic in my professional talks about tribal forestry. Occasionally, depending on my mood, I'll expand and share a little bit more of Ricky's story, but you get it all today. And I get to tell you about the storyteller. I'll tell you about Ricky with his story that he shared with me. I think that stories can help perpetuate lasting impressions of people and their uniqueness, and I'm happy to honor and celebrate people in stories. And I'm definitely using Ricky's bravery to be up here, standing, talking with you today. So I met Ricky because he visited my office in Baraga once in a while to talk with his cousin. So you have to know everything about Ricky is big. He has a booming baritone voice. His person just gets larger from the waist up until he has wild black hair that just extends beyond his massive shoulders. And his deep laugh, I mean, while it's booming, it's definitely soothing. He almost had to whisper to reach a conversational tone when he did talk with us and tell us stories. Ricky wears black leather and he does it perfectly. It suits him so well. So he loved our office because it had hot coffee and his dear cousin, and he liked to get our opinions and reactions from things that he said. So Ricky talked to us. He told us about his experience on the edge of his community. He told us how he spent months riding his bicycle across Michigan to visit family, sleeping in the woods or beaches, and fishing from streams on the way. He told us how he was incarcerated. When he was released, he lived in a temporary dwelling between the prison and town. Ricky is proud of being one of very few skilled craftsmen who is asked by his community to preserve and tan sacred animals for ceremony. So maybe Ricky was not quite belonging. Maybe he was doing things that were not typical. But by telling us stories, by telling me stories, Ricky helped me feel more connected to him, the reservation, and the community. So we will pick up the story of the L'Anse Reservation being founded in place around Keweenaw Bay and continue with Ricky's story. So way back in the day, in the early days of the reservation, people came and they tried to move the Indians from this place. And the white people around who had settled in the area, who had married and made families with and had connections with the Indian people, they were connected to the Ojibwe people and they said, no, you cannot move these people. They belong here. They are us. So I get goosebumps whenever I say that. They are us. And I can think about this simple statement for a long time. This statement gives me a legacy of bravery and unity and justice. It helps my vision from which I work and live. And I'm not the only one. As you use, I know this simple statement of social justice resonates with many of us. It can exhilarate and challenge us. They are us. It's so powerful and it's not stated enough in my mind. But also this statement, they are us, it makes me feel uncomfortable, especially as a white person. It sounds like we might be wiping away a whole people or shielding them, like masking them from harm with our privileged identity. But I also love the fact that us means us, thoroughly, all of us. No one is left out. It helps me think that we cannot help but describe each other's identities when we try to define our own. We can't talk about our own identity without filling out the edges and knowing other people and their identities and the beautiful diversity of us. I think we create our identities fully when we better know the other creatures, people, places, and water that surrounds us. I know I still take a lot of pleasure in getting used to knowing the plants and places and people surrounding me and learning how I relate to them. I'm still exploring and getting to know this place around me. And this act of being in a new spot, spending time in it and realizing who is around you makes me feel like I belong. As a friend told me, home is a place where there are many adventures to be had, always new places to explore. May there always be new relationships and new adventures in our home. So this adventure of reaching out and challenging ourselves despite of or in spite of our fears, that is really Ricky's story. He felt he lived on the edge. And maybe he recognized that I didn't quite belong either. I was a non-Indian white lady serving his community and people. So he threw out a line and a story to connect me, to connect him. How brave. He's the hero of the story. And I'm so glad I got to share Ricky and his story with you. Looking at how I've thrown out lines, I realized I learned and have acted from what I've learned from Ricky. For example, one of the scariest things I can fathom is not being safe in your own home. So I decided to volunteer at the Barbara Ketta Gun Lock Shelter. I offer my time and presence to people brave enough to leave an abusive relationship and start a new, better home for themselves and their families. This action inspires me, being around these brave people, and it helps me belong here. I also listen to stories, and then I share stories with my community. All of these acts of connecting help me, help us belong. And these acts help us belong to each other.